Good evening, everyone. I'm going to try this out. Please excuse me if I get this wrong. Google told me that I should try and say, got gold. That is good evening in Icelandic, but I'm fairly confident that I didn't do a great job of that. In any case, a very, very warm welcome to London Business School. I am Gillian Koo. I'm a professor of organizational behavior here at the school, but I'm also the Deputy Dean of Faculty. It is my very greatest pleasure to open the event this evening. Today, it is my profound honor to welcome Halla Tómasdóttir, the President of Iceland, to London Business School. President Tómasdóttir is a leader whose career spans business, entrepreneurship, global advocacy, and now public office. Before becoming Iceland's 7th president, she built a distinguished career as an entrepreneur, a business leader, and a global advocate for inclusive leadership and sustainability. She served as CEO of the Iceland Chamber of Commerce, co-founder of Our Capital during financial crisis, and later led the B team, championing values-driven and inclusive leadership around the globe. Again, as somebody who teaches organizational behavior, this is certainly very, very close to my heart. As president, she has emphasized unity, long-term thinking, gender equality, ecological responsibility, and participatory governance, principles that speak directly to the kind of leadership our world needs at a moment such as this. Before I continue with our evening, I would absolutely like to be grateful to acknowledge that she is joining us this evening to share her thoughts on vision, her thoughts around leadership with us. At LBS, our mission aligns very closely to this, as you can imagine. For those who do not already know, our mission is to have a profound impact on the way the world does business and the way business impacts the world. And we aspire to convene distinguished guests from around the world to bring insight, innovation, and inspiration to some of the world's most pressing challenges. Events like this very one, which place leadership, purpose, and global responsibility at the center, are indeed at the very, very heart of our mission. I would also like to recognize the Wheeler Institute for Business and Development, our host this evening. Created thanks to the generous donation from Tonine and Maureen Wheeler, founders of Lonely Planet, the Wheeler Institute has built an extraordinary legacy of bringing distinguished voices to our community, such as heads of states, Nobel laureates, world-class academics, and global business leaders. Its purpose is to explore how business can be a force for good and for development, and its work exemplifies the school's ambition to be a place where leadership does not remain abstract, but inspires meaningful impact around the world. Tonight absolutely continues this tradition in a truly exceptional way. It is also a pleasure to introduce our moderator, Professor Kostas Markidis, a great colleague of mine. Kostas is the Robert P. Bauman Chair in Strategic Leadership and Professor of Strategy and Entrepreneurship here at LBS, a very, very long and fitting title. Through his research, writing, and teaching, Kostas has helped countless leaders navigate disruption with clarity, integrity, and creativity. His current research explores how we use the technologies of the social era, as well as new and disruptive business models to solve big societal problems, such as poverty, malnutrition, inner-city crime, and climate change. We are delighted to have him guide tonight's conversation. A final couple of thank yous that I absolutely need to extend this evening. First and foremost, a special word of thanks to Antoinette and John Vermiglia, alumni, friends, and generous supporters of the school for facilitating the introduction that made this very visit possible. Also, a special thank you to the Embassy of Iceland in London for the opportunity and impeccable collaboration. Finally, and of course, a heartfelt thank you to President Tómasdóttir herself for honoring us with her presence today. Thank you as well to our audience, those of you who are joining us in the room, as well as the many who are joining online, for spending an hour with us. We're very, very glad to have you with us. We're truly privileged to host this conversation. Let me stop hogging the microphone and pass it over to the President and also to Kostas.
So, Madam President, on behalf of London Business School, again, thank you very much for being here. We're grateful. I understand you were just telling me that you were once at our school like 27 years ago or something?
Yes.
Yes.
Well, about 8 years ago. I'm not exactly sure. You've long been a role model to me, London Business School.
I'm glad to hear that. And hopefully the next time we'll not have to wait for another 27 years to see you back at the school.
Little secret, I have a plan B now because he just said I could come back and teach here. So.
At the academic salary that we offer. So thank you very much. Let me apologize on behalf of the school that I know your great work on gender equality and the fantastic work you've done in Iceland, and we're going to talk about it later on, but I thought I'll start by saying I apologize that my school could not find a female professor to interview you here rather than have a man, but
we just had one introducer,
okay,
so you're clearly doing okay.
All right, thank you very much. And just to the audience to say that I'm going to have a conversation with the president for about 35 minutes, and then we'll open it up for your questions, if that's okay. So, Madam President, can I start off? You have an MBA, and you have a business background. You work with PepsiCo and Mars, and you had your own investment finance company and lots of other things and so on. So my first question is, as somebody with a business background, and a political newcomer, let's say, in Iceland without being part of a political party, how do you manage, let's say, being a president, and to what extent do you use the knowledge that you develop from your MBA to be the president and do a good job as a president?
Well, we'll leave it to the voters in Iceland to say if I'm doing a good job. I'm in my first term. But thank you all for having me and for being here to have this open conversation about, we certainly are in interesting times. And I have, I'd say I've done a lot of different things, and I probably am an entrepreneur at heart. But I've also run a nonprofit, and I've started all kinds of activism in lots of different places, and I was part of founding a new university. And so to me, the red thread of my life is really that I've been trying to work with humans to lead transformations or change. And I really don't think that that's something that we can do from just one background anymore. But I think it's very helpful if you have that range of experiences and insights to lead today, because we live in a world where we frankly don't trust each other anymore. We don't trust business, we don't trust government, we don't trust young people, don't trust older people, we don't have trust within the world, within societies, we don't trust media, we don't trust ourselves even. And so we are in a trust crisis, and I think leadership today is far more about bridge building than ever before, or needs to be far more about bridge building. And I think it is very helpful that I have had experiences within academia as an entrepreneur, and in a way I think I'm approaching the presidency as an entrepreneurial candidate and in that role.
So you would say that your MBA education has been helpful?
Yes, I know you want to hear that. I know you all want to hear that. At the end of the day, we want
it's a good investment.
It was a fantastic investment for me. I studied at Thunderbird. I thought about LBS. Thunderbird at the time organized its MBA as 1/3 business, 1/3 international political economy, and sort of understanding how the world comes together to try to solve challenges and take advantage of opportunities, and 1/3 language and culture. And I've always found those three legs to be very helpful. I mean, businesses, when I look at the world today, I see business at its best is there to solve problems. But somewhere along the way, business started to contribute overwhelmingly to the world's problems. Government is there to set the rules, or make sure we have the right rules, and align incentives with the behaviors that we need to see more of. And I'm not sure government is doing a great job at that anymore. We can dig into that. And citizens are there, all of us, to keep both government and business to account as consumers, as voters, etc. So we all have a role. And I don't think any of the big challenges we're facing right now can be solved just by business, just by government, or just by citizens. I think all of us are needed. All of us have a role in this great transformation that's underway.
And maybe that's a good way to get into the topic of today for a conversation. It's about leadership with purpose. You've talked a lot about purposeful leadership. So first question would be, can you please explain to us what you mean by that term, leadership with purpose?
Certainly. As I said, I believe business at its best solves problems.
Right.
But we somehow in 1970 read an article in New York Times by a great professor at the time, Milton Friedman, who said the only purpose of business was to maximize shareholder returns. And I don't really think he said how we interpreted it, and that's a longer topic. We're not going to fully deliver that tonight. But we all sort of took on this narrow definition of business, that business is there to serve shareholders only and deliver financial profit only to them. And that then we make a lot of money, and then we try to take that money and do good with it to right all the problems we created by doing business with such a narrow definition of success and with so few stakeholders in mind. And for a while, I believe this served us. I believe this drove economic growth. I believe this helped us develop at different rates and scale, but it helped us. But for a long time, I think we all know that this view of business's role is no longer serving us because we are facing a climate emergency, or at least a climate crisis. The planet is held in balance by 9 planetary boundaries. 6 or 7 of them are at risk, or we have already surpassed them. So that sounds like our home is not in a very stable position. Our home is not well. We are not well. We are facing a mental health pandemic, burnouts, anxiety, depression, loneliness, all kinds of, we can go through all of that. So the humans are not doing so well. We're at war. We're confused. We don't know what we can trust anymore. There's disinformation, misinformation. Our democracies are suffering. We have great many challenges. And so I believe business needs to go back to what I think business and entrepreneurship has always been about, solving problems. And so I think you need a purpose that is around a problem that you're solving. And then I think profit follows, and people want to work for you. It gives you meaning, we get to matter, and we can solve these challenges. And as I see it, we have solutions to all of them, but it's very hard to solve massive challenges in a model that has a design problem.
Yeah.
The design problem started in 1970. Business schools have been teaching this model by and large, and we are finding it very, very challenging to disrupt how we do things in business schools, in government, and so we continue to do more of the same, expecting a different outcome, and our problems become bigger. So purpose is to me to define a problem that you as a business try to solve.
Yeah.
And as a person. I think we need that kind of a purpose ourselves as human beings. And I think that's your compass in these uncertain times. You know what you're there for. Right. You know your why.
I don't disagree with all the challenges that you name, and they're very serious, but I'm trying to see the link with business. We're not saying it's business that created these problems.
Well,
or are we?
Well, yes, we are. So we are here to, I try to be a bit provocative because as a former teacher, I want us to think. So I'm not going to just say something that's easy. I believe business is creating a lot of the problems. Let me give you a very clear example. There is now plastic in the ocean to the degree where most of the seafood we eat is filled with it, and that is ruining our health and creating healthcare problems and expenses that our societies are finding it hard to manage, and our men are going infertile. So that's just one example. We're eating food that is produced and created in ways that is both breaking down the natural environment and our well-being as human beings. More people die from bad air quality than anything else in the world every year. I think I could go on for a long time, and I think so business didn't set out, I think, to create these problems. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying the way we are doing business and the way we are setting the rules, those of us serving in government, and the way we are consuming, those of us who all are, I think, citizens, is all contributing to the problems we are facing. And so we need some kind of a rethink, a redesign, and I think dialogue is the beginning of that. I think we need to have more tough conversations. We may not always agree. And instead of doing that, what we are finding is we are finding ourselves in algorithms. Speaking of business, right now, I think it's like 10 companies are about 20% of the world's economy, 10 companies. So let's talk about the crisis of inequality. And those companies, they mine our data that we give mindlessly to them while they rob us of our attention. And we're all trying to figure this out. So the problems are systemic. Yeah. They are design problems. So I'm not pointing at individual businesses, but we have designed a system that overemphasizes delivering financial profit to shareholders only and underemphasizes the need to have a meaningful purpose that helps us solve challenges.
Yeah. Okay, you convinced me that business has a lot to account for. I could argue the case that business also has done many, many other good things.
Oh, yes. Let's not forget about that. But you said, what is purpose about? It's about solving problems. And I can give you lots of examples of companies that are doing that. And so we have purpose-driven companies.
I'll come to just, if I may, all the problems you identified created by business, as an economist, one would say they are all externalities, and the solution will be for the government to step in and do something about it. You're proposing a different model. You're saying it's not the government's responsibility to solve these externalities. It's for the companies themselves to take responsibility and kind of sort them out or try to limit them.
I'm saying we all need to change our ways if we are to have a livable planet. Government has a role, business has a role, citizens have a role. And I am saying, I'll give you a concrete example that many of you may connect with because we're here in London. Unilever, company I worked a lot with. I worked with Paul Polman when he was CEO. He delivered 300% return to shareholders over his 10-year tenure. And did a lot of good things. He bought companies like Seventh Generation, which is a company that was trying to solve certain challenges with cleaning products and pollution directed at that. They bought Ben & Jerry's. They bought a lot of purpose-driven companies, good companies. Some of those companies started to change the culture at Unilever, and Unilever did a lot of good and is doing a lot of good as business. But I think anybody who follows the news also knows that their shareholders, Paul Polman, when he took over, which was right after the financial collapse in 2008, in January 2009, when he took over as CEO, he basically said to his investors, if you're not in it for the long run, leave. And he got away with it for 10 years. Because he said, I'm not going to talk to you on a quarterly basis. So he basically said, we have a design problem. I'm going to talk to you once a year. I'm going to focus on sustainable living as a premise, and I'm going to transform this company. Fast forward, I think his legacy holds well, but the company is under pressures from a market design that requires delivery of financial profit to the quarterly basis. And so what happens? Ben & Jerry starts suing the company that bought them because they don't feel like they can be purposeful companies within that design. Yeah. So I think we need to be frank right now, and we need different metrics and different time horizons in order to be able to build a sustainable world. And business cannot say, oh, we're just going to create profit until 10 companies or 10 people have more money than all of the global south, and dump all those problems on the global south and drown them or put them on fire or sink the rainforests that are supposed to capture carbon, that are essentially all of our lungs. We cannot say that they are free from that and government just takes taxes and fixes that. We need business to be done responsibly with a long-term horizon and with a bigger definition of success.
Perhaps this gets me into the point of I don't know any company or any CEO who will disagree with the noble goals that you set here and say, look, you're responsible, you have to take responsibility and so on. So what is it that stops companies and businesses from? Is it you talk about the emphasis on the short-term results and so on. What other things do you think?
I think the design problem is real. Okay. That you have to report quarterly, that the definition of success is financial profit. That is changing. Accountants are coming in with new standards. They created the standards for financial reporting, and now they're creating the international sustainability standards, something I worked on in my previous role. This is changing the definition of success, so things are starting to change. But I think the biggest problem is what I call a crisis of conformity. And crisis of conformity is when everybody looks, feels, and thinks the same way, goes to the same schools, learns the same thing, and nobody ever challenges your worldview, basically lack of diversity in every possible definition of that word, age diversity, gender diversity, global diversity, ethnic diversity, neurodivergent diversity. The lack of that means we just don't question the way we've been doing things. And we don't get new perspectives or new solutions or more innovation into the boardrooms or into the leadership rooms or into the classrooms. Although I think in classrooms, young people are telling us, I mean, I'm not telling you anything new, Kostas. Business students at Harvard Business School, of all places, over half of them have said they lost faith in capitalism. This is Harvard Business School. So if we're losing faith in capitalism, we must admit that we have a design problem and we need an upgrade or a new version of capitalism. And I'm advocating for capitalism that places care for the well-being of people and planet at the heart of its definition. And we're trying to do this with a well-being economy in Iceland, learning with a few other countries, other brave countries. Maybe small countries are going to be the brave ones. And I see lots of small companies and new companies and entrepreneurial companies trying to change this. But big global companies suffer from a crisis of conformity in addition to the design problem. And the opposite, or the solution to crisis of conformity is courage. And courage is not easily seen these days. I mean, people just like, we have pushed back on some of the things that have brought us progress in the world, and everybody just goes quiet. Stops talking about climate and gender equality and all the things. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I've seen quite a few of your interviews over the years where you talk a lot about the need for courage. Yeah. Why do we need this courage? It implies that if I change what I'm doing, there's something bad and I need or something I'm fearful of, and therefore I need courage to overcome it. Yeah. What is it that they're afraid of?
So now we're getting into territory that's probably not fit for a business school, but to me, to me, we live in a world of fear right now. And fear lives in our heads. And it's paralyzing. Okay. We don't do much in our own lives or in corporate life or in societal life if fear is what gets the best of us. Courage lives in the heart. And that's probably the least exercised muscle in humanity's time right now. The one we need to kind of rely on a little more now. Yeah. Because in our hearts, we know what we care about. I don't know a single being that doesn't want to leave a better world for their children or grandchildren. I don't really know anybody who thinks it's okay that we're ruining nature or doesn't find that they regenerate themselves in nature. I don't really know any human being who wants to live in a world at war or in a community that's coming apart because of this and misinformation and tensions and otherness and all of the problems we have. So I actually think we as humans agree on what kind of a redesign we need for the world, and that we need to come together to do it, and most of us want to be part of something that has that kind of a meaning. What is holding us back is fear. And so how do we meet that fear? We meet it by dropping from our heads to our hearts more often, listening to truly what we know as human beings matters, and from there comes courage. Actually, the Latin root of the word coer, heart in French, is cor, which is courage. That's where the word comes from. It comes from the word for heart. And courage is not enough because you can be very courageous. I worked with Richard Branson, the famous entrepreneur. You're probably too young to maybe know who he is, but he is very courageous. But sometimes somebody who's really courageous can come across as arrogant, someone who knows it all or thinks he knows it all. And so I always say courage has to come in a sandwich with humility. The fact that we recognize that none of us seem to have all the answers today, including me for sure. But if we're humble enough to come together and listen to each other and learn from each other, that we can and know we need to lead a transformation. And without courage, and if we're just humble, I think the Nordics may be a little bit guilty of this. Maybe not Iceland. We are a little bit crazy little Nordic country. But I think the Nordics are humble. They're a little afraid to let their light shine in this world because they're humble. And yet I think the Nordics have figured out a way of life that is quite something that we should be sharing more widely. So we need a little more courage to share kind of how we built capitalism with care, maybe.
Could I propose another source of fear, which is that if I was a professor of finance, I'll say that one of the problems is, with any organization that has multiple objectives is that sometimes you have to sacrifice one objective to achieve another. So maybe the fear is that by asking the corporation to aim for profits and the climate control and profits may suffer. And that's a fear that if I try to do other things, I'm not going to be as profitable. And if not everybody does that, and I'm the only one, I wouldn't be penalized.
And we have plenty of examples of where that's happened. So you are right. I think that is a fear. And I think the fact that CEO tenure has gone down a lot in these latest times is also, you know, alongside the fear, there's greed. And I think some people think because it is not going to cost you profit if you have a long-term horizon on it, because it's already more cost-effective already to be a green company, to be a sustainable company. It is better for you in the long run. It may just not be better in the quarterly perspective or in 1 year horizon. So if we could shift, and I don't want to talk about the problems only, but I mean, there is fear and there is greed, and we should recognize it. And maybe there always will be. So some CEOs, I feel, and I've had these conversations with many of them, they tell me basically, you know, I don't have the board behind me, or they say, I'm not going to have long enough of a tenure to be able to do this transition, and so do people in government. But I have three sort of ways that I try to talk to people about how to like solve for this design problem while we haven't changed the rules of the market-based economy or gotten a new article into New York Times that will listen to as much as we listen to Friedman. Maybe that article is the missing piece. First is, I think we need to really close the gender gap in order to expand our definition of success. Because I have seen, and research supports this, that when we close the gender gap, and I mean gender gap, I talk about women and men. Men have gender, let's be very clear about that. But the values we embrace in business right now is competition at the cost of everything instead of collaboration to save everything. And collaboration is a bit more of a value that if you have greater gender balance, you're more likely to collaborate. You're more likely to talk about long-term interest of children and well-being of employees, and climate gets on the agenda, and you're just more likely to have a more responsible board or leadership team. So we have to close the gender gap to expand the definition of success. We have to bring young people into the conversation with much more fearlessness, because they ask the best questions. I sat with a CEO of a fossil fuel company maybe 5-6 years ago. And he shared with me, after having quite a lot of red wine, that his daughter had asked him a very challenging question at the age of 16. She said, "Daddy, do you want to be responsible for the greatest crime in human history against my generation?" Daddy, like, what do you say, you know? He was a CEO of a fossil fuel company. He no longer is, but he was at the time I met him, and he told me the story. And he spoke to me at length about how he didn't have the backing of his board that was basically operating against the defiance of the design that we have. So it wasn't like he wanted to, at least in words, but it was his daughter that unlocked courage in him. And I have now worked with companies that have started. IKEA is a great example of a Nordic company that decided very courageously to be people and planet positive by 2030, and they brought in 15 to 20 climate activists and made them their advisory board. And they learned a lot from the IKEA older leaders, and the older leaders learned a lot from the young leaders. So I'm seeing innovations on closing the generational gap. And then last but not least, and I think that helps us shift our time horizon. And last but not least, I think we need to be much better at closing the global gap, because our ways of doing business and running our Western capitalistic economies, we're dumping it on the global South. And I think when when you see and hear that directly from people with those lived experiences, that changes your sense of responsibility, and you start to think how it is really you need a bigger stakeholder group at the table to talk about whatever business you are in today, or government.
Yeah. I suppose it's a hard sell to go to the developing world and say, these are the things we should be promoting. They probably expect the Western world to lead the way at first before we can ask them to participate.
When you speak to people from Africa, as an example, about the green transition or the energy transition, they say, we use this much per capita energy, you use this much, and so you change your ways before you lecture me. And I understand that. Yeah. So one of the things that might come out of the mess we have right now in the aid world, which is inhumane and painful in many ways, but maybe the silver lining in that transition is that maybe we will start realizing that investment in capacity and market building and entrepreneurship is a better way. And Europe, for example, stands to benefit greatly from investing in that capacity in Africa, where the people and the talent and also the refugee challenges come from. But we don't think enough like that. We think about dealing with the consequences of the root problems, and so I think it's time for us to really try to think about the root issues and solve them at the root level and not at the consequence level.
Yeah. You mentioned the Nordic countries, and you mentioned a couple of companies that you consider best practice examples. I don't know if there is a particular company that you like to single out and say, here's an example that the rest of the world can look at and say they are doing this purposeful leadership. Why don't we learn from them?
I wish I had like a long list of companies that I would hold to the gold standard. What I see is a long list of companies that are trying to get to a better standard, and we don't have a lot that are at the gold standard. But if I was to mention one Nordic company that I'm a great admirer of, and they're a global company now, in addition to IKEA, who is a real Nordic favorite, it would be Novonesis, a sister company of Novo Nordisk, used to be called Novozymes. They're basically using enzymes and small microbes and catalysts to help learn from nature and let nature solve our sustainability challenges. One example is how to break down food waste faster and more sustainably, or how to ensure that the detergent we use doesn't pollute our waters. Or I could go on. They basically say nature has the answer, and they are learning from nature and scaling those solutions for businesses. So they're like a B2B business that's helping a lot of businesses solve their challenges. I'm a great admirer. A CEO, a woman, fearless woman is their CEO, and no surprise. And she basically is so committed to intergenerational dialogue and design that I've traveled widely with her, and everywhere we go, we end up with young leaders somewhere in deep dialogues about purposeful business. So she knows this is a talent issue for her. She knows this is a question of new perspectives, and she knows that as a company, if she really closes the generational gap, she will be a strong company that will deliver value, true value in the biggest sense of that word. So that's a company I highly admire.
Okay. And talking a little bit about how we can make this transition to the new world and so on. Usually ingrained systems like this, they need a shock to change. And I don't know, to what extent do you think we need some kind of a shock to the system to start a serious change here?
Well, we think we need more. I feel like it's plenty challenging out there right now. But you're speaking to someone who lived through a very famous financial meltdown. And I was the co-founder of a very small women-owned investment firm when that happened, and the only asset manager that survived that financial meltdown in Iceland at the time. Partly timing, partly great team, only women. But we did want the men. They just didn't want us until after the financial collapse. But mostly purpose-driven philosophy. And I honestly feel like our principles saved us. We believed in risk awareness, profit with principles, more of a long-term horizon. And I really think it mattered for us, but I'm not going to rule out timing and team. So if that is what we need to redesign or deal with the design problems we have, I just say, God help us all, because that was hard enough in 2008. right now, I said before, 10 companies represent 20% of sort of the stock market value in the world right now. They're close to, I think they're 37%, fewer than that are 37% of the US stock market value right now. And AI, mostly this is driven by companies that are considered to be leading the AI revolution. And if you think about it for a moment, if they have a hiccup, I think we will get the flu. And it will be a really difficult flu. So I really believe in what AI can help us do.
Okay.
But I'm very concerned about AI without any principles, without any purpose, without any compass. And I feel like we're sort of going through this disruption right now, just believing. It's like the bet that actually happened in Iceland that came tumbling down. It was like the biggest leveraged country in the world. In 2 years, from 2006 to 2008, we went from the banking system being something like 4 times the size of our economy to 12 times the size of our economy, like in a very short amount of time. And those were banks that lent money. And I think we have a little bit of that risk right now of that level. And it's so few people that might just take us. I don't know what could happen.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that I think there's a terrible shock ahead. That's like the worst thing. I'm a prisoner of hope and a stubborn optimist by nature. And I believe we have all of the solutions to these challenges in hand, and also all the money we need to invest in the transition we need. And I'm going to bet that humanity is going to wake up to that rather than having to get to a worse state.
So if you have most of the solutions, it's a matter of convincing people then.
I think it's a matter of human science. I think we haven't figured out the human science. And I'm looking at our OB professor here. Because scientists and humans are incredible. Like we have a company in Iceland that's capturing carbon and turning it into stone in 2 years. Like can do it direct from factory, can even transport carbon and turn it into stone. I saw companies yesterday at Sustainable Ventures where 1,200 people work here in London that are creating flexible solars that could create energy and like putting heat pumps in houses where we can sustainably heat and cool all of our houses that are the built environment and the transport environment are the most wicked challenges left in the green transition. We have the other solutions. And there's plenty of money clearly out there because all these countries are now committing more and more of their GDP to defense. But I'm saying security issues that we are facing are not just conflict and war. We are facing insecurity of boys. We could talk about that. We're facing insecurity of the planet. We are facing insecurity when it comes to our data and information, and I could go on. I think securing a livable future is the challenge of our time, and we have the solutions for it and we have the money for it, but we need to come together in a very different way to solve these challenges, and humans like what they have always known. That's the crisis of conformity. So it's a hard human science to figure out. But
can I ask, maybe you can use your experience for 6 years, from 2018 to 24, before you became president. You were the CEO of the B team, which had these noble goals in mind. Maybe you can say a little bit about the B team and what you tried to achieve, and maybe use that as the platform to tell us what did you learn in convincing people to make this transition.
Anybody heard about the B team? Yeah? Okay, a few people. The B team was founded, I came to become their CEO when they were only a few years old. It's basically a non-profit of 30 global leaders, mostly business leaders, but some former heads of states, one current head of state, and people who've led large NGOs. The current head of the World Trade Organization was one of its founders. Mary Robinson, President of Ireland, the current Prime Minister in Bangladesh, part of the team. So really courageous leaders from different walks of life, mostly from business, who decided to come together and say business as usual is no longer an option. So we're going to work together to have sort of conversations about how we shift it. And we're going to start by leading bravely in our own company. So the founding premise was we changed our companies, we tell those stories, and we'll inspire more people to do better. And I think that's still very much the premise. But I'd say the biggest lesson I learned from working with leaders of Unilever like Paul Polman or Jochen Seitz, who co-founded the B team together with Richard Branson and was the CEO of Puma, made Puma a sustainable brand and turned, I think, 1,700% profit in so he delivered the numbers, but he did it by focusing on sustainability. People like that, their stories are inspiring, many of them. Hamdi Ulukaya, who founded Chobani, he was a Turkish refugee who came to the US with $3,000, spent it on learning English, and then worked at a farm, and then founded a company and hired refugees. Didn't see them as a threat, hired them for jobs, and he built an amazing company and is now absolutely one of the most successful stories in the world. So plenty of good stories. But what we learned is individual stories are important. Yeah. We need them. We need these lighthouses, and we need to share their stories. But coming together into really tough dialogues about some of these systemic challenges, seeing the system as a whole, from a government perspective, from a business perspective, from a business school perspective, from a young people's perspective, it's important. Some of the best things we did to help shift policy was when we sat down across generations, across the globe, across business, government, and citizens, and had some really, really tough conversations. And we sat with deans of business schools. I started that just before the pandemic, and then we met virtually. And we had really tough conversations about, are we really teaching future fit leadership, or are we teaching the past still? What are we doing? And some people are doing amazing things and transforming their schools. But I also went to AACSB conference with 800 leaders of business schools, and was yelled at by someone from Texas, and so I'm not going to judge anybody from Texas, but like he said that he was going to lose his sponsors if he talked anything against fossil fuels. And to me, I just think it's like the railroad moment when we said, we talked about the railroads, you remember. We're old enough to remember when the railroad problem happened, or the Industrial Revolution. We're at very unusual times. I think those who define themselves as a fossil fuel company are not going to do well long term, but those who define themselves as energy companies and go with the most cost-effective, sustainable solutions long term will do better. I think there are many companies that will die in this transformation we're in.
And one last question from me before you open it up to the audience.
When it really gets hard.
Because there's another best practice example, let's say, that maybe you can learn from, and that would be gender equality in Iceland. And your country has been a fantastic example for the rest of the world in what it has achieved. In fact, I was reading that this month that it's the 50 year anniversary of the great march. Was it a women's strike in Iceland, and a march to the capital?
How many of you have heard about the women's strike in Iceland? I'm just curious. See, not that many, but some of you. I'm inspired by that. So 50 years ago, I need to describe it for people, therefore. 50 years ago, women in Iceland did something incredibly courageous. They decided to take the day off or go on a strike. The ones who were on the right side in politics wanted to call it a day off. Those who were on the left side in politics wanted to call it a strike. And they had big tensions. Note, this is before social media or internet or anything. They organized October 24th, 1975, as Women Will Do No Work. And they brought Iceland to a standstill. There's a new documentary out called The Day Iceland Stood Still. You gotta see it. It's a good story. I don't care if you're a woman or a man, or I don't care where you're from, it's gonna inspire you. It's a great story. And they basically, 90% of women participated. Majority marched into Reykjavik, the center, and in great solidarity, courage and joy, chanting and singing and having fun, they shifted norms like nothing else has in my country, or I'm not sure I have many examples of that in the world. And 5 years later, Iceland was the first country in the world to democratically elect a woman as president. That would not have happened, and I would not be here as the second female president if it hadn't been for the courage and solidarity and joy and humor of those women who came before me. And after that, we saw all women political parties come into municipal and national government, and we started building universal childcare, and so both women and men could work. Later, we did universal or the same parental leave, whether you're a man or a woman, and so that changed the work in the home and the workplace. And so we've done lots of policy changes, but the norm shifts happened with that event. And I feel like Iceland has enjoyed, I often say Iceland is fueled by girl power and geothermal power, because, and I'd say this is a very sustainable formula for a country. At least it's brought us to sort of now nearly 2 decades leading the world in closing the gender gap. We usually rank #1 and being the most peaceful country for 17 years. We have some of the highest GDP in the world because we use all of our people. Like, we allow everybody to contribute to our society and country, and that's just a smart economic policy.
Yeah.
And we say we're happy. I actually don't know if that's true in Iceland or across the Nordics, but we are always the happiest countries. We enjoy well-being beyond that of many. So, and I think we owe that to those women who had the courage, foresight, and the humor and joy to pull something off that's incredible. I don't know if we could pull something like that off today, but just last month we celebrated 50 years and filled the center of Reykjavik again. And I think Iceland will stay the course, but I think the next phase of closing the gender gap in Iceland needs to be about seeing the issues around boys and men. And I want to be very clear that I think if we want a gender revolution, it's not about counting number of women and men or where people want to identify on the gender perspective. It will be about understanding that gender has a transformative power to change our definition of success. To include the well-being of people and planet in our definition of success. That's the power of gender. It creates a better world for everyone when we have all of those perspectives and all of society at the table. It has a transformative power, this gender revolution. And I think women in Iceland started that revolution and they continue that revolution. Young women keep us on our toes. But I think we have left the boys and men out, not just in Iceland, but maybe around the world. And we have a bit of a backlash going on right now, because at the end of the day, and this is the story I really want you to remember, I was 7 years old when this strike took place. It was my mom's birthday, and she had 8 sisters and 2 brothers, and I had never before seen the husbands and the brothers at work in the home. I mean, it had always been the women, but this day they were serving and cleaning, and they did it very poorly, I might add. Hot dogs sold out in Iceland because women didn't cook, and that was the only thing they knew. That's everybody's favorite story, nothing like really. So and I asked my mom and her sisters, why are you on a strike? And they responded very simply, because we want to show that we matter. And I think that at the end of the day is what we all want to do. We want to matter. We want to be seen, valued, and heard. We want to contribute. We want to have a purpose. And I think what has happened is boys and men feel, as we have been empowering women and girls, and are still not done with that, and people of different origins and backgrounds, that somehow it's a zero-sum world and that they may have been left behind and there may not be enough for them. Whereas I believe it's an abundant world, as long as we understand that we have value in every single human being and we need to unlock all of it. And to me, the gender revolution is about unlocking the full value in all of humanity.
So Iceland, being a small, tiny nation, led the world over the last 50 years in gender equality. Do you think you can lead the world in changing leadership norms and values the way you talked about today?
I will certainly try.
Very good. We can open it up for the audience. I think, to be fair to the audience. Oh, you have a lot of hands now. So I'm going to start with the young man over there. Can you please name you, wait for the microphone and tell us who you are?
I like this audience. They're eager to ask questions.
Hi, my name is Abon, and my question is basically, in recent interviews, you've said that the pursuit of profit at the expense of climate and well-being is no longer an option. So how do you think that national leaders can balance economic growth with with environmental sustainability, and what are the actionable steps they can take, and what are some of the actionable steps we can take to, kind of contribute to this?
So just because I'm not sure I fully heard you, did you ask how would leaders of companies or national leaders?
National leaders.
National leaders. Well, what I can tell you is part of the Well-Being Government Economy Alliance, which Iceland is a founding partner in, along with Scotland and New Zealand and Finland, and Canada is also coming in to collaborate with us. We are actually trying to learn that from each other. What are the other metrics that we need to be putting into the goals of the country and the budget of the country, etc. One of them being mental health. I mean, how do we think we have a prosperous future with economic growth if everybody is feeling full of anxiety and depression, and we have young people thinking that there's no hope? So we're trying to figure out and learn together. It's still early, and I hope we get some bigger courageous countries joining us in this effort. But I think we need to go beyond measuring just economic growth, because the economic growth that comes with lack of well-being of people, I think, has an end in and of itself. And I think this is why we have disruptions in societies and in democracies all around right now, because people's affordability challenges, lack of hope for the future is bringing out the worst in people, not the best in people. So this is a real challenge. And what can we do as citizens? Very good question, because I believe, I often say there are human rights, but there are also human responsibilities, and we need to think about them hard right now. We need to use our votes and our wallets very consciously now, and our voices. And I find that the silencing that I feel like is going on right now, because we're sort of canceling individuals and words in the world, is very dangerous. And so I really, my single biggest message to all of you is there is a leader inside of each of us. Leadership is not given by position or power, although you can do more when you have that. But it's inside of every one of us. And now we need to lend it in service of a meaningful purpose and a better world. And we cannot be silenced. We need to kind of try to we need to find ourselves again in this attention economy where we feel quite lost. Yeah.
Thank you.
Maybe on this side, the young lady here, maybe? We have a microphone? And I'll come back. I know there's quite a few hands over here. I'll come over.
Good audience at late in the evening.
Thank you very much. It's been a very interesting session. The question I have is just flowing from what you were saying about well-being. How are you promoting well-being in Iceland in a way that it balances the business needs and the individual needs?
Well, on a sort of rational level, we are starting to implement in Iceland, as UK is starting to, new standards of accounting, international sustainability standards, which basically require companies to disclose a bigger definition of success. So that's sort of a rational approach. But on what I think is a more powerful example I'd like to share is we've seen rise in violence in Iceland, as I think most societies are seeing these days. And we've seen rise in anxiety, depression, loneliness, all of these like really alarming statistics about how people feel. And last year, when I was only 3 weeks into my role, we had a knife incident in Iceland. And I know for many of you, this will sound like something that happens every day, but it was the first time in Iceland that a child, a 17-year-old, used a knife that harmed a 16-year-old girl who died from her wounds. So we basically had child take another child's life. And that was a national trauma for us. It's not Icelandic for that to happen. Nobody felt this was right. And it was very difficult as a new president, what do you do? But I convened into my largest dining room, the dining room, which can fit 30 people who are really working in the system that is supposed to help young people with their well-being, and young people together in a dialogue, a long dialogue. It was supposed to be 60 minutes and lasted hours, and the after conversation even more. And we founded a movement which we are calling Nights of Love, and I'm not talking about evenings of lust and passion, to be clear. I'm talking about people who want to advocate for compassion and love as the way to meet this hard world of ours where violence and anxiety and loneliness is growing. And it's very much led by young people now, supported by me, and amazing things have happened in this informal movement. So my other leadership message to all of you, in addition to there's leadership inside of each of us, is really that leadership is best done when shared, as the women of Iceland demonstrated 50 years ago. And so now there's a movement of so many people that are writing songs about like how to bring about a more compassionate society. Compassion circles are being held, including with all men participants, talking about what does it mean to be a good man? Is there Are there role models and ways to be a good man that can show up in this world, or is it just about muscles and money? Or is there some other way to kind of show up in this world as a young man today? And lots of other examples I could say, but I really believe that there is energy around movements that help shift norms, that help us do the right things in the policy space. And if we just do policies, it doesn't necessarily shift culture. And if we just shift culture and don't embed it in policy, it doesn't necessarily bring lasting change. So I think both is needed, sort of societal norm-shifting efforts and policies that change the rules of the game.
Okay, maybe you can get 2-3 questions in one go.
Yes.
So let's start. The young gentleman over there has been raising his hand for a long time.
Yes, please. Sorry. My name is Mr. Briggs, T. Briggs, and I run a charity for young people all over UK. And I've been doing this for 13 years, just to educate them, consistent mentorship to better their lives. Now, my question is this. With so much uncertainty in our world today, what advice would you give our younger generation of today, focusing to become better, making impact in their lives and the society?
Great question. Shall we take a few more and then
Yeah.
I'll try to get to...
If it's really any related question, okay, the gentleman here.
Madam President, Chief Samuel, all the way from Nigeria. I am extremely impressed with all the hard work you've done with the B team, with our friend Richard Branson and all the team there. I just wanted to ask you just a quick question. Looking at the global stage, the future of AI, risks to nature, you have China, you have America, and you have Europe. What could be your challenge, taking a very strong view about Africa? What could you advise the African government to do a bit better, taking a very strong view of what Iceland is doing better, both in nature risk, sustainability, and all the good work that your government is doing? And lastly, when can we see you in Africa? Thank you.
So I'm not sure they are related, the two questions, but maybe you could...
Let's take one more and then I'll try to
Yeah.
keep them all in my
Okay,
mind.
can I have the gentleman here, please?
Hi, I'm Mark Edwards of the Strengths Explorer. So I go around the world consulting companies on getting the very best out of their people. I was amazed by what you said in terms of gender and everybody wanting to be seen. Like, I rarely see big female leaders saying that. I think it's a really important message. My question is about courage, and it feels to me as you were talking and I was listening, you were talking mainly to leaders. And I work with leaders, but I also work with big swathes of middle management, lower management. So when you're talking about courage, what do you mean for those people? Because I'm seeing in many, many organizations who perhaps aren't as great as IKEA, people becoming quite lost. It's very dependent upon who's my manager, you know? And I see when people, if they eventually do leave and create their own micro business, wow, they're fulfilled and making a contribution. So what are your thoughts about having courage and what that means if you're in an organization, you're not a leader, and you're perhaps a little bit lost?
Yeah.
Great questions. I'm going to start to relate like the first one and this one, I think, and then I'll come to you. First of all, I want to repeat, and I think this is very important. When I say a leader, I see one in all of you. I believe there is a leader inside of each of us, and our greatest work in life is to unlock it in service of a greater good. So we need to all do the work. I call it the inner work. We need to all try to get to understand ourselves in order to be able to contribute outside of ourselves. I sometimes say to people, the way out is in. Start by knowing who you are and what you stand for. And that, to me, is some kind of a moral compass or an inner compass, whatever people are comfortable with, that where you try to put words to your purpose and the principles that are going to guide your journey, because we don't have anything else right now. Because the uncertainty is so great. We're sort of going through the perfect storm, or not the perfect, the imperfect storms. We're in total chaos. There's so many things coming at us, so many revolutions. And I think the only thing that can help us stay strong, no matter where we sit or serve, is to have a clarity on who we are, what we stand for, what is going to help us navigate these times. And so I think that's the biggest message to young people, and thank you for working with them. And what I really tried to say, I think we need to rethink our education system now with AI coming and everything, and really start early to teach people to work on and with themselves. And that will help. If we can work on ourselves, if we can find inner peace, we will find world peace. I think when we are in the attention economy, constantly working with the lizard brain, sorry to throw away slang like that, but when we are reacting, we have a reactionary brain and don't reflect and resolve things with sort of connecting all of our abilities, and also from the brain to the heart. I think that misalignment there is great right now, and we focused so much on teaching people knowledge, and now, ChatGPT and whatever else it's called can bring a lot of that to us at the fingertip. But how do we teach inner resilience, inner resolve? How do we unlock courage? How do we understand our emotions and not react by killing somebody or spewing terrible things out on the internet through our fingers, or that's slowly robbing. It's like secondhand smoking was when I was young. We smoked in the car with our kids in the back seat. I think we're going to look back at this time and say, we had no rules about what people could spew out there in the space, and like our children are scrolling this all day long, 9 hours a day, and getting 225 notifications a day, and like we wonder why they can't think or read or have attention span, or why they have anxiety and loneliness or get radicalized, etc. So I think this is the work of the moment, wherever you sit, however old you are, to really learn to work with yourself. And I think it needs serious focus. I think we should introduce meditation in schools and really, really think about how to teach people to drop from their head to their hearts more powerfully, to work on themselves, to learn inner resilience and inner tools to deal with the state of the world, because I don't see it getting easy anytime soon. But if we do this work, I'm absolutely certain humanity has the ability and the answers to meet this moment. I just think we need tools, and I think boys in particular, young men, need tools. I think girls do too. It's interesting, they feel inadequate from this life on the screen and on the social media. They don't feel like they're enough or that they have the right things, but men feel lonely. In a new book that just came out in the US, over 40% of young men had never approached a young woman in person, in real life. And it is in the nature of young men to approach possibly another man also, but it's in the nature when you're a young man to want to approach and speak to someone you are sexually attracted to. But now that large of a portion doesn't do it. And so I think we have real problems, and we need to learn to work with ourselves. I want to come to Africa. I will be the first Icelandic president to go on a visit to Africa. I will be. Hopefully more than one country. And what I think Africa, we need to focus on with Africa, and I could say to some extent to South America, some parts of Asia, but let me focus on Africa and Nigeria, where you're from. Look to Kenya. Kenya is now over 90% renewable, and is really growing fast because they've focused on this transition. Many of their engineers learned geothermal and gender equality and land-based restoration from a school that we run in Iceland. We've trained hundreds of geothermal engineers for Kenya, and Kenya has a very bright future because they have energy, and they have sustainable energy, and then they're doing a lot of other good things. So I think you can learn from Africa as well, but I think you can send people to learn from us. And I think what we need to learn in Europe and in the Northern Hemisphere is that we need to be supporting your entrepreneurship and your ability to be a green supply chain for Europe. So we're going to a multipolar world, and I believe if Africa comes together more powerfully through Africa Union, Africa should be getting a seat at the table. Most of the population growth is coming from Africa. Most of the talent and young people will be coming from Africa. Most of the minerals, China sees this and has been investing in Africa because of it, but I feel like Europe has failed at seeing both the opportunities that come and could come from Africa if we partner with you. Don't feel sorry for you, but partner with you and empower you, and don't dump our bad behaviors on you. And I think maybe we could talk about the refugee challenges we're having in the world a little bit differently if we thought about helping you have valuable lives in Africa. And that means energy, that means education, which also comes with energy, and that does mean that we need to move to a place where Africa can be trusted and where we have less corruption challenges and sort of more functional. And I think that is a real issue Africa needs to kind of try to deal with on their own. I don't know that, but we can support. I think that's an important infrastructure issue that Africa needs to help, that people can feel like we can trust that we can trust the long-term ethical governmental standards. I think that's an important thing to address. It's such a complicated conversation and a long one, but a short story from a B-team leader, Mo Ibrahim, who founded Celtel in Africa and became wealthy, and he started the Mo Ibrahim Foundation. He hosts a governance weekend in Africa every year, and I've been to a few of them in Kenya, in Abidjan, in Morocco, and he brings leaders from everywhere, and this is the best conference I ever go to because the diversity of participants, and I always learn so much out of my comfort zone. And he gives out £1 million award to the least corrupted leader in Africa. And for 3 years, he couldn't give it out. Probably made his prize famous, and maybe it was a trick. It was before I knew him, so I don't know. But there is a challenge with that, so I want to name that. But there's a real challenge in Europe and in the Western world that we look down at Africa and don't understand the incredible resource and talent and supply chain entrepreneurship that we could unlock if we looked at the fact that Africa wants to matter.
I think.
Thank you.
I think we have time for one last question. Maybe I'll come on this side and okay, wherever the microphone is closest. Yeah.
Ma'am, thank you. You're an exceptional speaker. The speech and the statements that you gave were really, really strong, and I'm really happy to be here. My quick question to you: you said that the businesses should go ahead with doing what they do best, and they should be the ones leading change. But businesses obviously want profit. What do you think the heads of states around the world can realistically dictate to the businesses? For example, they can go ahead and say that all tobacco manufacturing should be banned. But that wouldn't be the best for the companies, for the people who work in them. It wouldn't be good for shareholders. So what do you think are the realistic limits for the heads of states to dictate to businesses to go ahead and cause the social change?
Shall we end with that one?
Yep.
I don't know how we're doing on time, but yeah. I think we are. So a very good question. And I believe the government's role is to write the rules, to create kind of rules that I don't believe government should interfere too much. I still believe in capitalism. I just want it done with care for people and planet well-being so we can still have people on this planet and have a planet to call a home. But the rules and incentives need to be right for the future and not the past. And the best example I can take of how we are failing at this for us to remember is that when Russia invaded Ukraine and we had an energy crisis across Europe, to think close at home for a moment, almost all governments started subsidizing people's energy bills in order to be able to survive the political turmoil. And almost all of those subsidies go to fossil fuel-based energies because we have a design problem there as well. So we are subsidizing what I call environmentally harmful subsidies on an annual basis now of at least 6 or 7 trillion US dollars every year. We only need a portion of that to invest in the green transition that would essentially depower Putin. And so I think the green transition and the energy transition is the most peaceful thing we can do. So I call on governments to think about aligning incentives with the future we want and need, and not the past of conformity and what we've always done. And when we're in crisis, we don't think our actions through, I think. And I think it is horrendous and incredible intergenerational injustice that we we go to COP conferences, there's one right now in Brazil, and we come back and invest in our own demise with your money, with taxpayers' money, corporate taxpayer money, with our money, we invest in our own demise. I think that's an intergenerational crime. And we only need a portion of it to invest in a transition that is more cost-effective, can deliver more profit longer term, can help the company's life, kind of stay alive, can help us stay alive and have better quality of life. And so I think governments need to kind of unravel these black boxes of incentives and rules that may be maintaining a world in trouble and aligning it with the world that we need. That's the main role of governments, in my view.
Very good. Can I, on behalf of the whole audience, say a big thank you? We're grateful that you took the time to share your experiences and wisdom with us. I'm particularly thankful that the whole hour you did not mention once that Iceland beat England in football, which is...
I had to work very hard on that one.
So thank you again, and thank you to the Wheeler Institute for organizing this fantastic event. We have a small little present for you, Madam President. I'm afraid it's mostly books.
Never apologize for books when it comes to Icelanders. We've published and read more of them throughout the centuries and still do. So that's the best gift.
Thank you very much. Once again, thank you very much. Thank you very much. That was wonderful. Wonderful.